tell you another story, a real story. I have a couple of friends in Odessa. I told you that. One of them, Anna, she works as a manager of apartment units and stuff. She does that. She's also fluent English, 30-ish, and an interpreter. You could hire her, and she's fluent. Very nice woman. I really liked her a lot as a friend. Mm-hmm. And then the other, Victoria, she was older. She was late 40s the last time I talked to her. She's the one that was married but separated. And she managed apartments that's what she did for a living. I think she managed 20 apartments or something like that in Odessa. And Victoria and I got intimate one time. But we got intimate in our relationship as far as communicating, and her English was immaculate too, and we got very close. And she would told me a couple of stories about the dating agencies, because she was affiliated with them in the sense that she rented apartments to them. Mm-hmm. The dating agencies rented her apartments on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. So she heard the stories.
She not only heard the stories, she saw the aftermath. So she was there. She said, and this was what I was telling you earlier about several of the dating agencies being affiliated with escort services as well, basically prostitution. And she said, she says, I've several times rented these apartments that I manage, and it would be just almost like a revolving door. She said, this one guy from such a country, mm-hmm. Had more money, had all the money. The money was not an issue, but he wanted 2 to 3 girls a day. And the agency would send over 2 to 3 girls a day. And he went for like 4 or 5 days, and he was just here on a sex tour. Mm-hmm. And then she told me another story, that this is one I was actually getting to. She rented an apartment to a man who was in his 60s, I think, but not in good health. Not a healthy man, not a man who kept himself in shape, but a nice guy. Mm-hmm. And he had made a connection with a 30-year-old, beautiful young 30-year-old woman. And so he came over, rented the apartment for a week or however long it was, and met her, went out on a date, and it seemed like it was okay. And so maybe he was there a couple of weeks. And so he started buying her expensive presents right off the bat, because she was a beautiful woman paying attention to this old, shriveled up, ugly guy, and she said, Victoria said, and he really was ugly. It just was not it was hard to look at. Mm-hmm. And she was really pretty. And it was going, and then about a week into it, she had sex with him. And he was buying $1,000 gifts for her and doing really, coats and clothes and jewelry and spending a lot of money. He had a lot of money. He was spending a lot of money on her. And they were actually had sex. And Victoria, in her way, she says, and I saw the wrappers. I know he was taking Viagra. And feeling really good about getting some, whatever. And that's okay. I don't have no problem with that. That was just her observation, and the way she would say it.
But the sex tourism,
But this was a guy who fell in love.
Brothels. Oh, he fell in love.
This was not a man coming over here for sex. This was a man who actually, she said, genuinely, he fell in love with this woman. He wanted to marry her. He was buying her all these gifts. He proposed marriage to her. He was absolutely in love. Well, we need some time. And so he went back, and they had sex a few times, and he went back, and of course the letter writing probably continued on, and then I think it was a few months later, he called and wanted to rent the apartments again, and he wanted to come back, and that so-and-so was, they were in love and all this stuff, and came back, and this time it just didn't go anywhere. Well, Victoria... she's one of these women that take charge. I mean, God, did she ever take charge? Anyway, she's a
lot of those in the
Ukraine.
Oh
my God!
A lot of powerful women in the Ukraine.
Oh, she wore me out. Oh my God! don't even want to think about it. Stop it. She asked about the woman, this 35-year-old girl, young girl. So she went and asked about her.
To who? To her?
To the
woman?
agency.
Oh.
Because they were in cahoots, more or less. One of her friends on the agency that worked at the agency. I want to know about this. Tell me about this girl. Because now all of a sudden this girl didn't want anything to do with this guy. He had spent tens of thousands of dollars in gifts and stuff, and he was in love, and he was coming back over to rent the apartment, and he got there, and he was just, they were going to get married, on and on and on and on, and then she never shows. And she never answers a phone call. And he's going, Victoria, what's going on? So she was married.
She was married.
She was married and had a child. She was married, had a child. Her husband was fully aware of what was going on. The money and the gifts was too good to pass up. She was like, she sold her a few times. She had sex, and her husband was fully aware of it and fully in agreement with it. And he spent $10,000 on her, probably, buying her gifts and furs.
So what do you think of that? She used him, but he used her.
Well, if it's
he used her beauty.
No. It's a different situation. I don't have a problem with it if it's a business agreement in that it's a beneficial. This was not a beneficial agreement. This man thought, and she convinced him that love and marriage were imminent in this thing. He got his heart invested in this way before he should have. And it's one thing if you enter into it, if he were to come over and enter into this and say, well, I'll spend some money on her, and if we get sex, that's great, but, this is not going anywhere, and I know it's not going anywhere because she's half my age. But if it did, great, but it's not. And, then...
But it wasn't that.
It wasn't that. He was convinced that
she was into him.
She loved him and was going to be married, and they were going to go back to the United States and live happily ever after. I have no idea if she told him that. This was the story Victoria was relating to me. I'm assuming that he probably shared a lot of this with Victoria because they got to know each other.
But you know what the women ask me when I interview them? They say, Joe, explain to me, how can a man how can an old man be with a young girl, 30 years old or whatever, and be thinking she is into him and she wants him?
Delusion.
Self-deception.
Good
answer.
It is. It's absolutely the answer.
An industry brainwash component, yes, but we have to take responsibility at the same time.
You're in marketing. Advertising is pervasive in our societies, in our world.
Yeah.
You don't always need to buy into everything that's being advertised.
Yeah, we have to take self-responsibility.
There's personal responsibility. So if you deceive yourself or delude yourself into believing that this is something that's real, then you're responsible for that. It's not something.
I agree with you.
It's self-responsibility because
I completely agree.
There's so many.
Because the women, this gives the industry the bad name. Because the women look at the men and these old men and say, hey, he deserves it. I've had them say that to me. He deserves whatever he gets.
It is partially true because there's personal responsibility involved. And if you will convince yourself, delude yourself, whatever, and people do it all the time about many things. It's all about a belief system that you develop, and it can be a delusionary one. Mm-hmm. And if you do see this as a reality, and you develop that belief system, you've just moved into the realm of science fiction.
That's all it is. It's a pipe dream.
It's a fucking Pollyanna dream, a fantasy world. You're better off living in your virtual world and jacking off, because this is a heartbreaking world.
Hey, it's Joe here. How are you doing? Listen, I wanted to talk to you openly and personally for a moment here. Maybe you're like I was, divorced 2 times and just really distraught and given up on ever finding your other half, a soulmate, your best friend, somebody that's amazing, smart, sexy, talented, educated woman that will rock your world in more ways than you can imagine. I've found that, and I wish you to find that. I fervently believe the best women, the best wives are in the Ukraine here. I wish you all the best in your personal journey to find and marry the most incredible, amazing Ukrainian wife you could possibly imagine.